We've just gotten our hands on a new government report out of Nepal, and it has put a massive price tag on the Gen Z movement that rocked the nation back in September. And let me tell you, the cost is absolutely staggering. We're going to break down the official numbers, both financial and human, because they are truly shocking.
Okay, let's just start with the big one, the total financial damage. The official assessment is 84.45 billion Nepalese rupees. Just to give you some perspective, that's over 630 million US dollars. It's a colossal amount of money, but honestly, it doesn't even touch the most devastating cost.
Because beyond all the property damage, there is a tragic human cost. The report has now officially confirmed that 77 people lost their lives.
And look, these aren't just estimates pulled from thin air. These numbers come directly from an official government committee that was put together for one reason: to assess the damage from those 2 days, September 8th and 9th. So let's dive into exactly what they found.
First things first, let's talk about the most important part of this report, the human cost. It's really easy to get lost in the billions, but behind every single one of these numbers are people, families, and entire communities that have been affected. So, the report confirms a total of 77 fatalities. But a key question is, when did these tragedies actually happen? The timeline is pretty revealing.
You can see this grim escalation. On the first day, September 8th, 20 people were killed. The very next day was the deadliest, with the number jumping to 37. And what's really crucial here is that the violence didn't just stop when the protests did. Another 20 people died in the immediate aftermath.
And beyond the fatalities, the number of people who were injured was just immense. The official count is 2,429 people.
Now, when you look at who was injured, that name, the Gen Z movement, it all starts to make perfect sense. A staggering 59% of the injured were young people, between the ages of 13 and 28. It just goes to show how central the youth were to these events.
And this wasn't just some protest isolated to the capital city. Not at all. The report confirms that this movement was truly nationwide. Damage and casualties were recorded in 54 of Nepal's 77 districts.
Okay, so let's shift gears now to the financial side of things. That 84.45 billion rupee figure is huge, so how does it actually break down? Well, the damage was spread out, but it's clear the government and public institutions took the biggest hit by far, at almost 45 billion rupees. The private sector wasn't too far behind, with over 33 billion in losses, and then community organizations and other groups made up the rest.
So what was actually being damaged? Well, when you look at the physical property, two categories just dwarf everything else. The damage to buildings was the largest by a long shot, accounting for over 39 billion rupees. And right after that, you have vehicles, with losses of almost 13 billion.
To make those public sector numbers a little more real, the report tells us that over 2,100 government and public bodies were affected. This included damage to more than 2,600 buildings and, get this, the destruction of over 12,600 vehicles. I mean, the scale is just immense.
So, with the full scale of the devastation now laid out in black and white, what happens next? Well, the final part of the report digs into the government's response and its plan for reconstruction.
You know, the official response was actually pretty swift. The movement happened on September 8th and 9th. Less than 2 weeks later, the cabinet had already formed the assessment committee. And 75 days after that, on December 11th, the committee presented this very detailed report and a plan for what comes next.
And that reconstruction plan? It comes with its own huge price tag, an estimated 36.30 billion rupees. And listen to this, that's just to rebuild government and public infrastructure. That's the immediate focus.
Ultimately, this report paints a really clear and, well, a sobering picture of the cost of those 2 days in September. It lays out the human and financial toll in stark detail, but it also marks the beginning of a massive question for Nepal. With such a monumental task ahead, what does the path to recovery truly look like? This report is really just the first step on what's going to be a very long road.